Now, before you start feeling satisfied when I tell you that Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has told Commonwealth leaders in a summit taking place in Western Samoa in late October 2024 to whistle for the 18 trillion quid that they want from the UK in compensation for colonial slavery, you should possibly take note of what the right is saying about that.
He was saying basically, no reparations, no conversations, absolutely no budging on anything like that. And as soon as he said that, I thought, well, we'll see about that, because every time he says he's not going to do something, he usually ends up doing it. He's now clearly making noises about some kind of possible non-cash reparation, which might involve either cancelling debt or kind of giving investment money for something.
Yes, I mean, Keir Starmer has built an entire career on flip-flopping on every stand that he's taken on a matter of principle. And all the clues are in there, as you've rightly pointed out. The weasel words. I think that the idea that we are going to stand firm, someone like Sir Keir Starmer, standing firm against human rights. I mean, he's a human rights lawyer. And these people of the Commonwealth Caribbean countries in particular, with a history of slavery, will be pushing, and he will find it very difficult to resist, especially when he's there in person, facing them face to face and listening to their demands, with which he will, as a left-wing Labour politician, sympathise.
Well, that is the problem. I mean, we've got a foreign secretary who actually said that as a Caribbean man, those are his words, he wants reparations.
Here, let me show you a clip of that very passionate speech about slavery reparations made by the now Foreign Secretary David Lammy. And then let me show you the very passionate criticisms that it triggered from certain commentators.
I'm afraid, as Caribbean people, we are not going to forget our history. We don't just want to hear an apology, we want reparation.
So he's now a Caribbean person as opposed to being a British person who happens to be Foreign Commonwealth Secretary.
Yes, I thought we had a British Foreign Secretary.
I thought so.
I wasn't aware that we had a Caribbean as our Foreign Secretary.
Be sure to subscribe, give this video a like and drop a comment. It will mean a lot to me. Of course, your man Trevor Kavanagh, political columnist for The Sun no less, knows all about David Lammy's commitment to getting slavery reparations.
Yes, he's on the record, not just at the moment, but throughout his political career, as saying that reparations are the way forward. And this is not helped by the rather liberal monarch. The King Charles is actually saying that now is the time is right for the conversation about this. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who is one of his best mates, is saying the same thing, that we've got to start talking about reparation, and indeed is devoted £100 million worth of Church of England money, which is non-existent as far as I know, to reparations. So this is on the cards, and I think that Starmer, as I say, tends towards sympathising with these claims and will cave in one way or the other.
Yeah.
Oh, so both the King and our Archbishop are in on the whole slavery reparations thing, are they? Interesting. But let's park that for now, because what I really want to know is, are the people of Australia, yes, Australia, convinced that the UK Prime Minister has made a sensible decision and has chosen to say no to paying out slavery reparations?
Well, I spoke earlier in the show about the left's push to divide us by race, and finally, we've actually got someone from the left making a sensible decision. Maybe. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said the Brits will not be paying reparations for slavery and climate change. His comments came ahead of the King's Heads of Commonwealth meeting happening in Samoa right now, where member states like the Bahamas and Barbados will push for trillions of pounds in compensation for Britain's sins. Joining me is GB News host Patrick Christy. Patrick, great to have your company. Keir Starmer says that agreeing to pay reparations would only result in never-ending arguments. I think he's probably right about that. But will he stick to his guns?
Well, it's difficult to believe him, mainly because the Labour Party here has spent years virtue signalling, some would argue race baiting, being on the side of anti-monarchy, pro-reparations groups, including our current Foreign Secretary, a chap called David Lammy, who is very vocal about his own family's Caribbean heritage and stood up and said, we, and I'm talking about him referring to himself as being someone from the Caribbean there, we demand reparations. Well, that was only a few years ago, so that gives the green light to all of these groups.
OK, fine, Mr Christy. Slam David Lammy all you want. At least you're not saying that the UK PM will hand out trillions in reparations for slavery as easily as he handed over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius.
The other aspect to it is that they only have to look at how the Labour government has behaved in office so far, handing the Chagos Islands over to Mauritius without a shot being fired, despite the fact they never really belonged to Mauritius. They did say that that was to right historical wrongs, so that's going to be a problem. Mauritius, of course, a close ally with China.
Oh. Well, at least you're not building up to slating Archbishop Justin Welby for his commitments to making amends for slavery.
We do also have a cultural movement in the UK, spearheaded, remarkably, by the Archbishop of Canterbury, who a while ago raised eyebrows when he said the church was going to pay £1 billion in slavery reparations. Everybody said, why? Then it turns out yesterday, his own father, great-great-great-grandfather, I should say, owned slaves. So the Church of England is now paying for his own personal guilt. So there is a push to do this, and it will be interesting to see whether or not our Foreign Secretary has changed his mind.
Yeah, just on the Archbishop of Canterbury, I did note he didn't immediately put his hand in his own pocket to pay back the money, but the parishioners' money in the plate will be used to assuage his guilt.
Well, scoff all you like, you two. I've come across a right-wing commentator from the UK, no less, who is 100% convinced that there's no way that the UK will ever pay a penny in reparations for slavery. However, I can't help but think that what she actually means is that there's no way that the people of the UK would stand for it if the UK government were to agree to pay any money for slavery reparations.
Let's start with slavery reparations, because this is a story that will not go away. It's been around for a long time. And then we knew that the Commonwealth had a government meeting in Samoa. There was going to be talk from particularly Caribbean countries led by the Barbadian Prime Minister, this CARICOM group of 15 Caribbean countries, basically saying, woe betide us, everything that's wrong in our country is a result of the colonial slave trade by the Brits, and we want reparations. Trillions have been mentioned. I mean, not even just billions. Trillions of pounds. I mean, more than the entire national wealth of Britain. I mean, yeah, seems reasonable. Never going to happen. Basically, they're saying, you owe us. It's your fault, you owe us. There hasn't been slavery for, 230 years, give or take? Isn't it something like that?
Exactly.
I find it quite extraordinary that these countries think that what happened hundreds of years ago is still their problem now. Because there is nobody right now in a Caribbean nation or an African nation that is living with the consequences of slavery themselves, are they?
Well, not the slavery that happened then, and Britain led the way in the world to getting rid of slavery completely. And the slaves were captured by different tribes. It was intertribal warfare that went on to get people and then to sell them into the European slave traders.
There was black people were sold by other black people to white people.
So where are they going to stop? You're then going to go and actually get the tribes that captured most people.
But why not? Why not get reparations from the people who sold your ancestors as opposed to the people who bought your ancestors? Both were wrong.
Yes, Mrs. Hartley-Brewer, both sides were wrong. But in fact, you needn't actually have gone to the matter of who did the selling and who did the buying, because you've already made the most important point. Slavery ended centuries ago. Those who suffered slavery are long dead, and they are the ones who were owed reparations. Those who enslaved others are long dead, and they are the ones who owe reparations. Therefore, the matter is a non-starter. Now, that point leaves us with a burning question. Why are the countries, all from the Commonwealth, of course, who are demanding reparations, especially now? Well, the thing is, the seeking of reparatory justice for slavery doesn't come from today. It's as old as slavery itself. Britain played a leading role in the transatlantic slave trade, which hit its peak in the 1700s. West African priests and others in positions of power sold their prisoners and their other people to the willing white buyers coming to their shores in search of people to work sugar, cotton and tobacco plantations without being paid. Kidnap was another important way in which European and American colonisers acquired their African slaves. Slavery didn't just mean having people working for nothing and having them do so for endless hours every day with next to no rest. It meant grievous bodily harm, grievous mental harm, rape and murder. It was chattel slavery. Slaves were property. A slave's children became slaves. Their children's children became slaves. But we already knew all that, which is precisely why we acknowledged that the slaves themselves would be owed reparations if they were still here, and that slave owners and slave traders, in fact, would owe reparations to slaves if they were still here. We can exclaim when we learn that the loan taken out by the UK government to provide the money pledged to slave owners in compensation for the abolition of slavery, which took place in 1833, was only paid off as recently as in 2015. But while exclaiming that fact, we have to understand that bribing slave owners to free their slaves was how the abolition of slavery came about. But pro-reparation groups say that former colonial powers are still profiting from the legacy of slavery, and that descendants of slaves, meanwhile, bear their own legacy of intergenerational poverty and its many consequences. There are at least two questions coming from those two claims. How are the former colonial powers still profiting from slavery other than in ways that they just can't avoid? And is the poverty cited genuinely and provably due to something that ended nearly 200 years ago? Are there no examples of countries that weren't colonised, but which are geographically quite close to countries that were, and which had a similar potential for wealth in terms of natural resources to countries that were colonised, and have today the same level of wealth or poverty as their ex-colony neighbours?
I'm kind of the view they've still been colonies. Most of these countries have only been independent nation states for probably 70 years, most of them. I'm thinking, given that many other economies around the world have come from the most, dire economic circumstances, either from abject poverty or post-war, Eastern European nations being completely colonised by the Soviet Union, etc., etc. I find it quite extraordinary that these countries think that what happened hundreds of years ago is still their problem now.
Of course, you don't necessarily get everyone expressing counter-arguments to the seeking of slavery reparations quite so subtly.
Isabel, our Prime Minister, our dear leader, Keir Starmer, he should be just about in Samoa by now, the South Pacific island where they are staging right now the Commonwealth Leaders Summit, where Keir will be presented by the usual absurd demands for slavery reparations. The Caribbean nations are asking for as much as, check this out, £19 trillion because to compensate for the fact that some of our forefathers kept slaves in the plantations in Barbados, etc. Nobody alive is responsible for that. And those idiots expect us to give them £19 trillion.
Idiots, is it? Yeah, not quite my idea of subtlety.
They should stop these absurd demands for reparations, for compensation for something that no one alive is responsible for.
Now, that's a lot more like it. Do you think the UK should pay reparations for slavery? And if so, when is your next psychiatric appointment? Mine's this coming week, in case you wondered. If you've enjoyed this video, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.